Next, I would like to welcome Mr. Paul Couto to present his topic, Where to from here? Can we please give him a round of applause?
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank RealTech for the invitation, for being here today. And I'm going to be doing a presentation. It's not a technical presentation. There's a bit of a disclaimer. It's the world through my eyes at this current stage. So please don't quote me on any of the things, but it's what I've read up and what I've sort of put together. But I think it's going to be interesting. So it's going to be a bit different. I think the topic of the conference is the future, and this is where I possibly see the future going. And I think with everybody sitting here with the mix that we've got, it might, well, it's definitely going to leave you with a lot more questions than answers. But I think that's what we probably need, is we need to stimulate ourselves with a lot more questions than answers today, because everybody sitting here is going to be part of the future. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to just say a big congratulations to RealTech. 15 years, that's a long time. You guys have put out really, really good products. And I'm looking forward to growing with RealTech as a company in the future. And hopefully with everybody sitting here, we can continue for another 15 years. But to put it into perspective, and this obviously, you can see this slide comes from my wife, because every year there's got to be a different sort of anniversary gift. So I thought to put it into perspective, because most of us here are married, want to get married, or have been married a couple of times. I'll put it in perspective of the 15th year anniversary. Now, coincidentally, and this is really coincidentally, the 15th year anniversary gift that you give your partner, which I believe as a supplier, as RealTech, with the client, is a good partnership and a good marriage, is to give them crystal. So normally, traditionally, it's a watch or something, sort of that crystal glass set or something like that. But what I'm going to be giving you guys today is a crystal ball, and it's going to be Paul Couto's view on where I think the future is going to be going. Okay, so that's my gift to RealTech. Right, so just an overview. Basically, where it's basically the world currently, where we are, where we're going, the drastic changes that have happened over the last 2 years, I would say. Global markets, copper, and I think copper is going to be the key word today. The South African mining industry, mine design, innovation and growth, and then I'll just show you guys some tools and prospects. Okay. So let's kick off with where the current world is standing today now. What is the worldwide buzzword? Okay. I think everyone's going to stick up their hand, they're going to shout out COVID-19. No, it's not COVID-19. Okay. So I know for the last 2 years that's been plaguing us, COVID-19, but it's not actually that. Before COVID-19, we focused a lot on what we call the fourth industrial revolution. And then the rocco landed and COVID-19 became the buzzword for the last 2 years. But what is the fourth industrial revolution? So I think this is a slide I'm going to spend some time on, I'm going to explain to you, because all of us sort of think the fourth industrial revolution is a new iPhone. Yes, technology is developing and we are going for those sort of things. But the fourth industrial revolution is a bit more than just that. It's a bit difficult for me to see this board, but let me go through it like this. So I think I'm going to touch on all these topics here, which I think we're all already involved in. But I think the important ones is the big data and analytics. Now, what we do currently is we collect a lot of data, and especially as engineers, we need to use that data and process that data. But I think the future is going to be, how do we use that data in a manner that it actually is beneficial to us? So there's no point in collecting data and just having it there if we can't use it. And when we do use it, do we use it in a way that's going to benefit us to the maximum? Okay. Cloud computing, I think we're all aware of that. I mean, we back up our phones on cloud, so everything's going virtual and digital. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Cybersecurity obviously talks to the rest. Then, internet of other things and integration with everything working sort of through servers and clouds, simulation, manufacturing, reality, robotics. But what I want to focus on over here is the horizontal and vertical integration. And I think that is critical and that's important. And I don't think we actually notice that it is currently going on, but we don't see it in the correct form. So horizontal and vertical integration is basically when companies and businesses look at how do they progress in either direction. So vertical integration means that how do we progress from exactly what Peter presented now, from the pit, mining that ore body, getting out that, let's say, for instance, commodity, and then from that commodity, moving it to the next supply chain level. So vertical integration on business is how do we purchase basically the entire supply chain? Now, that gives business stability. So when commodity prices drop, you've got something else. So if you're looking at recycling, you already still bringing the commodity back. So you still got the metal that you can resell. So that's the idea, is how do companies do this? Now, a good example of that is for instance Bidvest. Bidvest has done very well. They've bought up security. They bought up from the banks. They bought up cleaning services. They bought up Bidvest cars. So they've got a lot of different companies in a big group, which means that the minute the hired car business suffers during the COVID pandemic, the security business can still sustain it and pick it up. So business-wise, security-wise, they've secured themselves. That's part of the fourth industrial revolution. It's not just the latest iPhone, the latest tablet. Then the other thing in terms of horizontal, everybody's probably thinking, okay, so if you're going to look at the entire supply chain, what are we going to do horizontally? Now, horizontally means how do we diversify with, obviously we've got the Competitions Commission in South Africa that regulate these things, but how do we diversify with competition? So the latest news, which I think is about a week and a bit old, is Heineken, which is a Netherlands company. Heineken is looking at buying out Distell. Now, Distell is predominantly South African. They're here in Stellenbosch. And they have got African market, but they buying out another liquor company because it's easier to buy them out than to try and set up the whole industry again. So they're buying out current clientele base and they're moving and they're just growing their own network through those so they do horizontal shifts. Now, I think that's a fantastic strategic move, purely in South Africa, because we can all admit that all of us have got a drinking problem, and it's bloody good business to be in alcohol in South Africa. But that's a good shift. So for a family-owned business like Heineken to look at buying out a huge JSE-listed Distell, that's changing. So dynamics are changing. So business also has to change. Okay. Then the other big shocker, which we got in the beginning of November, was obviously after COP26. And it's not the oak that runs around and asks for 50 Rand bribes when you get pulled over. This is for climate change. There was an agreement, and obviously the agreement was, in summary, to accelerate the development and deployment and obviously look at other technologies so we can go greener, so we can have less footprint on the environment, those sort of things. And obviously, this is the one big thing, is phase out coal power stations. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. South Africa's got coal power stations. We've got lots of coal, and we cannot afford to go with anything else. So we're going to have it for the next 10 to 20 years. But it doesn't mean we should just continue with what we're doing. We need to evolve. So if we can capture certain gases that we emit and release it and try and recycle it and work in different ways, that's what we need to focus on. Okay. What we need to focus on is constantly how do we evolve with the world. So when the world decides on something or wants to go in a certain direction, we need to keep up. We need to keep up with that race. Okay. So yeah, what does it mean for us? And I think the picture on the right-hand side for you guys is you snooze, you lose. So we can't snooze. We need to keep up. And as South Africans, we've always risen above the rest. So we've got to keep on moving and going forward. Obviously, carbon taxes are going to impact us. So with big mining houses and that going forward, they are going to look at products, services, those sort of things that don't have such a carbon footprint, which is critical. You need to have that because that's going to affect your business in the long run. So all business going forward needs to look at how we're going to change this. Green business will definitely be driven locally and then obviously internationally. Innovation and technology will become crucial, and I think that's where we need to focus on. South Africans have always been an innovative nation. We've always found a way of doing things. South Africans in general are pioneers. If you look at this farm, 1652, I mean, we've always pioneered, we've always risen up above the rest. The challenges have been thrown at us, African problems, we always find African solutions. So we need to keep on innovating and driving technology. And obviously mining is going to have to change. So the buzzword was also mechanization. I believe the buzzword should be modernization. How do we innovate with current systems? So if we're going to have a guy on the face with a handheld, let him drill with a handheld. But how can we make the handheld drill at double the speed, with less the effort, with with double the efficiencies? You know, how do we modernize these sort of systems? If it only works for us in narrow tabular, we do it narrow tabular. If it works in certain pits, we do it in pits. But how do we modernize? So not just mechanization, modernization. And then finally, the last point, and I think it's going to be crucial, is artificial intelligence. So with all the data we're collecting, how do we process that and make it easier and simpler? So if we're going to collect tons and tons of data and data points in an open pit, how do we get all that data to eventually give us a sort of situation? So experts, analyzer, we say, if we're going to get that, you're going to start to expect X, start to expect Y. It's going to make all our lives a lot easier, and hopefully it's going to improve efficiencies going forward. So let's put it into perspective of where we actually lie in terms of mining. Okay, the countries that are the biggest miners in the world, obviously, is China, the US, Russia. Can you see that South Africa don't even feature on this? Okay. So we've also got to think not just South African, we've got to think internationally. And a lot of companies are doing that. I will show you a couple of slides later of which companies are thinking now more on an international platform, but also branching out into different commodities. But the good thing is, and these are stats from 2017, so obviously it was before COVID. But the good thing is, if you look generally across the world, there's a dramatic increase in mining throughout the world. And what does that mean? That obviously means that the world has got a huge hunger for the commodities. So there is going to be a very bright future for us going forward in terms of mining. But it all relies on us. We need to innovate and keep up with the times. Okay. I put this slide in just to show you in relation to where we are as South Africans. Stillwater Sibanye is over there. That's the only South African mining company, with Glencore right at the top, BHP, Rio Tinto, producing a lot of our sort of commodities, and obviously this is in US $1 billion. But put in perspective, we as South Africans need to think out of the box. We need to think out of our borders now. We need to start looking at other options. Okay. So what is the world market's hunger, and what is everybody looking at? Now, this is just roughly of electric cars. That's been in the news now. I mean, Elon Musk with his Teslas and all those sort of things, and that's something all of us can relatively relate to. But let's just look at it. Electric cars, your conventional car still uses a lot of copper. Offshore, all the solar panels and all the green energy still uses a lot. But predominantly, we're looking at copper as our main metal. All these other base metals here are extremely important. So for the guys in the Northern Cape, your manganese, your rare earth, also critical. Okay. Now, how does that relate to us in terms of South African markets? South Africa, we do have, as everybody is aware, a lot of coal and a lot of PGMs. Gold, yes, we've got iron ore, we've got manganese, chrome, those base metals we do have. But most of our employment in South Africa comes from those two commodities, coal and platinum. Now, the world wants to go away from coal. We know that. But we can't afford it. So we don't have to worry too much here. All we've got to do is innovate how we can get it to burn cleaner, more efficiently, and better. That's it. In terms of PGMs, we need to start looking at how do we dominate the world in terms of PGMs. If we've got 80% of the world's PGMs, we need to also put our foot down and say, if you want it, you pay our price. So business has to also change in terms of that. But while we're doing that, we need to diversify and look at how can we innovate with technology to make platinum more usable. So copper is relatively cheap and affordable and we can use it, but how do we get innovation going that we can use a lot more platinum than copper? So we've got to drive that demand. There is already a demand, but we need to try and drive it because that completes your vertical business chain. How do we make sure that what we're producing is needed and used? That's part of the fourth industrial revolution. So just some stats. In terms of copper, obviously you would like to know who produces the most copper because copper is going to be the keyword for this presentation. The Chileans are up there. Well, let's say the South Americans. The African region of the DRC is over here, and obviously that hasn't included the full potential of Kamoa Copper, who is going to kick in now with Ivanhoe. And if you look at their resources, they've got fantastic, percentage of copper. So when they do kick in, I think it's estimated in 3 years' time, then they will probably have the second highest copper production. It wouldn't be the second largest mine, but the second highest copper production at what they quote on the investors' slides and so on. But keep it in mind, for the next 10 to 20 years, the world is going to be suffering a deficit of copper. So we're going to have to try and produce as much as possible. That's also going to push how we're going to get efficiencies out. And that's going to require innovation to make that work. Okay. Now, everything in life is not doom and gloom. So you might think that I'm a bit of doom and gloom for the South African mining industry in that. But let's look at this slide. And there's something that I would like you to focus on in terms of the world map. This is just a plot of all the different commodities, not really significant on what they are, but what we've explored so far and where they are. And this is what I want to throw out to Ruotech as a supplier is, what do you guys notice in terms of this picture? So there's a lot of blue open space, which means underwater. None of us have looked at undersea stuff. Why don't we look at that? If we want to modernize or mechanize, why don't we go and mine below the water? 70% of the Earth's planet is covered with resources. And I can tell you now, you're not going to find coal under the ocean, but you're going to find base metals. You're going to find your precious rare earth metals. So why haven't we looked at that? Then global warming, we know it does exist, and the ice is melting. So the ice is melting in both of our caps, Antarctica, the North and the South Pole. What does that mean for us? Can't see at the bottom there, but what does that mean for us? If the ice is melting, it gives us accessibility to those areas. What can we discover there? We haven't been there yet. So it's not all doom and gloom. With every positive, there's a negative, and with every negative, there's a positive. It's how we use it. Okay. So I think in terms of innovation and growth, and I'm going to touch on this slide, and it's going to be very brief. I think in terms of surface mining, because we can see all of it, and Peter, you might disagree with me here, but because we can see a lot of it, and I think we're relatively developed with where we are. There are changes that can be made. I mean, nothing is perfect in life, but I think we're doing a bloody good job, right? In terms of underground mining, because we like, as miners, we like to keep it dark. So, yeah, there's lots of obviously political reasons for that, but we love keeping it dark underground. I think we are one step behind. We are nowhere near a sort of surface miner. I think there's lots of improvements that can sort of come out of that. And then finally, underwater mining. I don't think we've even sort of thought of that. So hopefully that plants a seed today with the audience that why are we not looking at different methods of mining? I understand there's different pressures and all those sort of things, but I mean, why can't we design machines to do it for us? So then I thought I'd touch on, having said all that and putting that into perspective, I'll touch on some rock engineering stuff is what I basically do, and what I've used basically over the last couple of years to assist me with some of my designs. as well as looked at different projects and how we're going to go forward. So rock engineering designs are relatively basic, and there's good principles, and we can go with that. But how do we take that to the next level? So how do we improve on those things, and how do we go forward? And I need to do that. We need to have, obviously, tools. And with those tools, we need to look at how do we collect decent data and how do we process that data. So the tools are a variety of tools for everybody. How do you collect the data? How do you design? Those sort of things, monitoring, and obviously refinement. So I want to show you basically a couple of tools that I've used for underground situations in my toolbox the last couple of years, and I've made a proposal to Reotech for a combination of some of these now to work together. But let's see how we go. But obviously the first one is borehole cameras. Fantastic. They work well. It gives you a visual representation. You can immediately see it, and you can make an informed decision. Nothing sort of out of the ordinary, but it's a good basic tool. The Rocco system is a system which I developed. It's a basic Excel spreadsheet with lots of formulas and iterations and so on. But it's an online system with Wi-Fi underground now. You go underground with a tablet. You can download. Well, you don't download. You input all your parameters, and you can save it onto the cloud, onto the server, and you've got it available on a database. So, production guys can see that, those sort of things. It's basically putting a bit of tech into it and making the old paperwork system into more of an electronic system. The RDC, I've used it very briefly, and there's been a lot of recommendations which I've sent to Reotech. Purely with the one button function and the fact that it doesn't georeference makes it not that user-friendly and not that accurate, but the georeferencing, I'm sure we'll sort out soon. And then what I've worked with a lot is obviously the SSP. Now the SSP also scans the hanging wall. We've done a lot of work with scanning through mesh currently, scanning different conditions, and obviously picking up different results, which you can see over there. So all worked well. But what is the question mark here? And the question mark here is all these tools are reactive. So how do we look at a tool that is proactive? How do we look at a tool that can scan ahead of the face? How do we look at a tool that we can put into the hanging wall and scan 3 or 4 meters ahead so that we can make an informed decision before we actually take out that rock below it where the wedge is going to form? So I think the tools that we've currently got are good, but we also need to innovate and develop tools that are going to take us that one step further. Right. So that's my presentation, short and sweet. Hopefully I've left you guys with a lot of questions and thought process can get going.